Doorman offers water to lost child. Little did he know she was the heir to 7 million. Robert Johnson was sweating in his navy blue uniform as he watched the steady stream of lawyers coming in and out of Riverview Estates in the upscale Upper East Side neighborhood of New York City. For 3 days, the activity had been unusual, and he couldn't figure out what was happening with the penthouse residents. That's when he spotted the little girl in a floral dress, walking alone through the underground parking garage on that sweltering March afternoon. The child was softly crying, clutching a worn-out rag doll, and as Robert approached her, he noticed a shiny gold bracelet on her tiny wrist. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you lost?" Robert asked, crouching down to her level. The child looked up at him with tear-reddened eyes and simply nodded. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old, and Robert felt his heart tighten at the sight. "Are you thirsty? Would you like some water?" he offered, pulling a bottle from the guard booth. The girl drank desperately as if she hadn't had water in hours. Robert tried talking to her, but the little one could only repeat one word he couldn't quite make out, something like Grandma Eleanor. As he tried to comfort the child, Robert noticed the commotion in the building had grown even more intense. The building manager, Mrs. Barbara, appeared in the lobby looking flustered, asking where the child had come from. But when her eyes landed on the gold bracelet around the girl's wrist, she turned deathly pale. "Where did you find this child, Robert?" the manager asked, her voice trembling. "She was lost in the parking garage, Mrs. Barbara. Seems like she's looking for her grandmother." The manager glanced once more at the bracelet and hurried off, muttering something about making an urgent call. Robert found the reaction odd, but decided to take the girl to his booth until he could figure out where she belonged. The little one fell asleep in his arms, exhausted from crying. Robert draped his coat over her and stayed there, watching her angelic face. There was something about this child that moved him deeply, maybe because he too had a granddaughter the same age. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now back to the story. Hours later, an elegant woman appeared at the front desk. She wore expensive clothes and jewelry that gleamed even under the dim lobby lights. She wasn't looking for a lost child. She was asking about a missing gold bracelet. "Have you by any chance seen a gold bracelet around here?" "It's a very valuable family heirloom," the woman said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Robert felt something off about the situation. Her gaze was calculating, cold. He decided to lie. "No, ma'am, haven't seen any bracelet here. I'm sure it's in this building. I'll offer a generous reward for its return," she insisted. "I'm sorry, but I can't help," Robert replied firmly. The woman left displeased, but Robert had a feeling she'd be back. Something about her deeply unsettled him, and he knew he had to protect the sleeping girl. The next morning, Robert bought the newspaper as he always did. In the business section, one headline caught his eye. "Williams matriarch leaves $1 million inheritance sparking family feud." The photo showed Mrs. Eleanor Williams, 78, who had passed away the week before, leaving behind a fortune estimated at $7 million. But what made Robert's heart race was another detail in the article. It mentioned a one-of-a-kind gold bracelet, a family heirloom, which, according to the will, would identify the true heir. The photo of the bracelet was identical to the one the little girl was wearing. "Oh my God," murmured Robert, looking at the child playing with her doll in the guard booth. The article also mentioned a missing granddaughter, the child of a relationship the family had never accepted. The girl's name was Emma, and she had disappeared in the chaos following her grandmother's passing. Robert read the article 3 times, trying to process the information. Could that innocent little girl sleeping in his booth really be the heir to $7 million? And if it were true, why was she abandoned in the parking lot? Around noon, the property manager returned, accompanied by a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as Charles Williams, the child's uncle. "Robert, this gentleman is here to pick up his niece. It seems the family has been desperately searching for her," said Mrs. Barbara. But when Charles approached, the girl clung to Robert's legs, trembling with fear. She clearly didn't recognize this man as family. "Come here, Emma. Daddy is worried," said Charles, holding out his arms. "She doesn't want to go with you," Robert observed, holding the child protectively. "It's normal. She's scared." "But I have all the documents right here," Charles said, showing the papers. Robert examined them, but something didn't add up. The night before, the girl had murmured Emmy several times, as if it were a term of endearment. He decided to test the man. "What does the family call her affectionately?" Robert asked. Charles hesitated for a moment. "Emma. Just Emma." The child looked at Robert and shook her head no. He realized she understood the question and that this man had lied. "I'm sorry, but I won't hand her over," Robert said firmly. "What do you mean?" "I'm her uncle," Charles shouted. "She doesn't recognize you, and that worries me." The argument caused a commotion in the building's lobby. Other residents gathered, curious. Charles threatened to call the police, but Robert stood his ground. Something in his fatherly instinct screamed that he had to protect this child. Mrs. Barbara grew nervous. "Robert, you could lose your job over this." "I'd rather lose my job than hand a child over to someone she doesn't know," he replied, his voice steady. Charles and the property manager walked away, whispering, but Robert knew they wouldn't give up easily. He hugged Emma, who was still trembling, and promised himself he would protect her. That afternoon, Mrs. Dorothy, an elderly cleaner who had worked in the building for over 20 years, discreetly sought Robert out. "Robert, I need to talk to you about this girl," she said, glancing around to make sure they were alone. "What do you know, Mrs. Dorothy?" "I worked for years for Mrs. Eleanor Williams in the penthouse. This girl really is her granddaughter, but the situation is very complicated." Mrs. Dorothy explained that Emma was the daughter of David Williams, Mrs. Eleanor's youngest son, who had married a woman from a humble background against the family's wishes. The Williamses had cut ties with David, and he left home with little more than the clothes on his back. Mrs. Eleanor deeply regretted that decision as the years passed, the cleaner continued. Especially after David died in a work accident 2 years ago, she became obsessed with finding her daughter-in-law and granddaughter. And did she find them? She did, and she adored little Emma. In the last few months, the girl had been visiting her grandmother almost every day. Mrs. Eleanor called her "my little Emmy." Robert's heart clenched at the confirmation. The child had murmured Emmy because that's what her grandmother called her. "But why was she lost in the parking lot?" Robert asked. Mrs. Dorothy sighed deeply. "Because the family found out Mrs. Eleanor had changed her will. All the money would go to Emma, and the older children would get almost nothing. And then they took the child from her mother by force and hid her. Mrs. Eleanor tried to stop it, but she was already too weak. She died without seeing her granddaughter one last time." Robert felt anger rising in his chest. "And now what do they want? They want to control the child to get access to the money. The mother, Jessica, was threatened and sent away. No one knows where she is." The situation was even worse than Robert had imagined. The girl wasn't just lost. She had been torn from her mother by a greedy family that wanted to use a 3-year-old to claim a $1 million inheritance. "Mrs. Dorothy, do you know where Emma's mother might be?" "I'm not sure, but I heard Charles saying she was in an apartment in Astoria. He said it would be temporary, until they resolved the situation." Robert realized he was facing an enormous responsibility. He had 3 children to support, and this job was his only source of income. But he couldn't imagine handing Emma over to people who clearly had bad intentions. That night, while Emma slept on the makeshift couch in the guard booth, Robert kept watch. Around 2 in the morning, he heard strange noises in the parking lot. He checked the security cameras and saw 3 men trying to approach the booth. Robert immediately called the building's security center and turned on all the lights. The men ran off quickly, but he understood he wouldn't be able to protect Emma alone for much longer. The girl woke up startled by the commotion and began to cry. Robert comforted her as best he could, but he could see she was traumatized by the last few days. "Emmy wants mommy," she said, her voice full of longing. "I know, sweetheart. We'll find your mommy. I promise." As he rocked Emma back to sleep, Robert noticed she had pulled something out of her rag doll. It was a crumpled piece of paper with a handwritten address and an urgent message. "If anything happens to me, take Emmy to this address. Jessica." The address was in Queens, on the east side of New York City. Robert knew the area. It was far from the center, but not impossible to reach. He made a decision that would change his life forever. The next morning, Robert asked his afternoon shift co-worker to cover for him for a few hours. He picked up Emma and headed to the address on the paper. The bus ride took nearly 2 hours, but the girl stayed quiet the whole way, as if she knew they were heading towards something important. The address led to a modest but well-kept housing complex. Robert climbed to the 3rd floor and knocked on apartment 34. A young woman about 25 years old answered the door and fainted immediately upon seeing Emma. "My baby, my little Emmy," Jessica screamed when she came to, clutching the child desperately. The reunion was heartbreakingly emotional. Emma finally smiled after days of fear and confusion. Jessica cried so hard she could barely speak, just repeating, my baby," as she covered the girl's face in kisses. "How did you find her?" Jessica asked, looking at Robert with endless gratitude. Robert told the whole story, from finding Emma lost in the parking lot to discovering the truth about the inheritance. Jessica confirmed everything Mrs. Dorothy had said. "Mrs. Eleanor tried to do the right thing in her last months," Jessica explained. "She regretted kicking my husband out of the house and wanted to meet her granddaughter. When David died, she was determined to take care of us both. But the family didn't accept it. Mrs. Eleanor's children were furious when they found out about the new will. They thought they were entitled to their mother's money and refused to accept a bastard child as the sole heir." Jessica said she had been threatened multiple times. Charles and his brothers wanted her to sign papers, transferring Emma's custody to them in exchange for a small sum of money. They said if I didn't sign, I'd never see my daughter again. They gave me this address and told me to stay here until they called for me. "And the will? Is it safe?" Mrs. Eleanor said she left everything with a trusted lawyer, but I don't know who it is. The only clue I have is that she hid something important in a safe, and the secret to opening it was in a lullaby she always sang to Emma. Robert realized the situation was more complicated than he'd imagined. Even though he'd found Jessica and Emma, they still weren't safe. The Williams family wouldn't easily give up on $7 million. "Jessica, I remember an old safe in the building's storage room. No one ever managed to open it, but Mrs. Eleanor had the keys to all the storage units," said Robert, an idea forming in his mind. "Do you think it could be there? It's worth a try, but going back to the building now would be dangerous." Jessica looked at Emma, who was playing peacefully for the first time in days. "I'd do anything to secure my daughter's future." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, back to the story. They decided to try during Robert's night shift, when there'd be less activity in the building. Jessica would stay hidden with Emma while he checked the safe. If they found anything important, they'd look for a lawyer for legal guidance. That night, Robert was more nervous than ever. He knew he was risking everything, but he couldn't abandon Jessica and Emma now. At 3 in the morning, he took them to the building's basement, through the back. The storage room was in a rarely visited part of the building. Robert had the master keys and knew every corner of that place. The safe was in a back room, covered by an old tarp. It was an old model with a numerical combination. "Emma, do you remember the little song Grandma Eleanor used to sing to you?" Jessica asked tenderly. The little girl began humming a simple melody. "Emmy, little Emmy, 3 little claps, 5 little kisses, 7 little hugs for my sweet grandchild." Robert tried the combination 357, but it didn't work. Then he tried other variations related to the song. When he entered 753, the safe opened with a soft click. Inside was a folder with several documents, handwritten letters, and a copy of the will. Jessica began reading the letters quietly, tears in her eyes. "My dearest Jessica, if you're reading this, it means something happened to me before I could resolve this situation. I ask forgiveness for all the years I kept you and my granddaughter from our family's love. David was a good man, and you are a wonderful mother. Emma is the light of my final days, and I want her to have the future I denied my son." There were several letters, all asking for forgiveness and explaining the decisions about the inheritance. The will was clear. Emma Williams Thompson was the sole universal heir to all of Eleanor Williams' assets, including apartments, investments, and the family business. Robert, it's all here. The lawyer's name, the documents, everything, Jessica said, emotional. But as they were putting the papers away, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Robert quickly turned off the light and signaled for them to stay quiet. Through the door's cracks, he saw Charles and two other men with flashlights. "I know they're here," said Charles. "The doorman didn't go home last night." Robert realized they'd been discovered. He motioned for Jessica and Emma to hide behind the safe while he tried to distract them. "Good evening, Mr. Charles." "Is something going on?" said Robert Johnson, coming out of the storage room as if he were just making his rounds. "Where is the child, Robert?" asked Charles, cutting straight to the point. "What child?" "Don't play dumb with me. I know you hid my niece. This is kidnapping." "I didn't kidnap anyone, I just protected a lost child." The men accompanying Charles moved threateningly closer to Robert. He realized the situation was turning dangerous. "Last warning, Robert. Hand over the child or you'll regret it," said Charles. At that moment, other building staff appeared in the basement. Dorothy, two daytime doormen, and even some residents who had heard the commotion. The arrival of the crowd saved Robert from what could have turned violent. "What's going on here?" asked one of the residents, an elderly man Robert knew well. "This employee kidnapped a child," Charles accused. "That's outrageous. Robert is an honest man," Dorothy defended. A heated argument broke out in the basement. Some residents stood by Robert, while others believed he should return the child to the family. The chaos allowed Jessica and Emma to slip out of the storage room unseen and hide elsewhere in the building. Charles realized he'd lost his chance and was furious. "Robert, you're fired, and I'll sue you for kidnapping and trespassing." "Do what you want," Robert replied with dignity, "but I won't hand a child over to someone she doesn't recognize as family." News of the incident spread quickly. By the next morning, reporters were at the gates of Riverview Estates. The story of the doorman who risked his job to protect a young heiress went viral on social media. Robert was indeed fired, but the public outcry led many to rally behind him. Donations poured in to help his family, and several lawyers offered to take his case pro bono. Michael Thompson Smith, a respected family law attorney, took on the case after seeing the news. He reviewed all the documents from the safe and confirmed the will was legitimate. "Jessica, you and your daughter have full legal rights. The will is indisputable," the lawyer said. "But the Williams family has power and money. They won't give up easily," Jessica replied, worried. "Leave that to me. We'll file for immediate execution of the will and protective measures for both of you." The lawsuit became one of the most closely followed of the year. The media covered every development, and public opinion was firmly on Jessica and Emma's side. The story resonated deeply with older women who empathized with Eleanor's pain and Jessica's struggle. Charles Williams tried hiring top lawyers to challenge the will, claiming his mother hadn't been of sound mind when she wrote it. However, the doctors who cared for Eleanor in her final months attested to her full lucidity. During the trial, more details about the Williams family came to light. It was revealed that Charles and his siblings had repeatedly pressured their mother to change the will in their favor. There were even recordings of them discussing ways to resolve the inheritance issue. Robert followed the entire case, always supporting Jessica and Emma. Even after losing his job, he never regretted his choices. Several residents testified on his behalf, praising his honesty and dedication. Dorothy revealed in her testimony that she had witnessed multiple arguments between Eleanor and her children over the inheritance. She confirmed that the matriarch was fully aware of her decisions and had changed the will of her own free will. "Mrs. Eleanor told me many times that she wanted to correct the mistakes of the past," testified the maid. "She loved her little granddaughter dearly and wanted to ensure she had a bright future." The turning point in the case came when Mrs. Eleanor's lawyer, Mr. Richard Anderson Brown, presented documents proving not only the will's legitimacy, but also several attempts by her children to coerce their mother into changing her decisions. "Mrs. Eleanor came to me multiple times in recent months, worried about the pressure she was facing from her family," stated Mr. Brown. "She even recorded some conversations because she feared for her safety." The recordings were devastating to Charles's case. In them, he and his siblings threatened to commit their mother to a psychiatric facility if she didn't change the will. The threats also included preventing her from seeing her granddaughter. "If you keep this crazy idea of leaving everything to a bastard, we'll have to take drastic measures," Charles's voice said in one recording. "You're old and confused. You don't know what's best for the family," added another sibling. Mrs. Eleanor's response in the recordings moved the entire courtroom. "You've forgotten that I'm still the matriarch of this family, and a grandmother who loves her granddaughter more than money." With this evidence, the case grew even stronger for Jessica and Emma. The presiding judge, Mr. William Carter Davis, known for his impartiality, was visibly moved during the hearing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Charles and his siblings, realizing they were about to lose, made one last move. They offered an out-of-court settlement. They would pay Jessica $2 million in exchange for her renouncing Emma's rights to the rest of the inheritance. "It's a good amount, Jessica. You could raise your daughter comfortably," argued one of Charles's lawyers during the mediation hearing. "This isn't about money," Jessica replied firmly. "It's about justice. Mrs. Eleanor wanted my daughter to have everything, and I will honor her wishes, Mr. Michael Thompson Smith advised Jessica to reject the offer. "You're entitled to the full inheritance. There's no reason to accept less." The final ruling came 3 months after the case began. The courtroom was packed with journalists, onlookers, and Jessica's supporters. Robert Johnson sat in the front row as nervous as if he were the defendant. The judge read the decision solemnly. Considering all the evidence presented, this court recognizes the legitimacy of Eleanor Williams's will and confirms Emma Williams Thompson as the sole and rightful universal heir. The will shall be executed in full. The room erupted in applause. Jessica broke down in tears, and Robert felt indescribable emotion. After months of struggle, justice had prevailed. Charles and his siblings left the courtroom defeated and silent. They would have to hand over all the family assets to a 3-year-old child they had tried to manipulate. In the following days, Jessica took possession of the inheritance. Beyond the apartments and investments, she discovered Mrs. Eleanor had left behind an accounting firm, employing over 50 people. It was an enormous responsibility for a 25-year-old. "I don't know anything about running a business," Jessica confessed to Mr. Michael Thompson Smith. "You can hire capable managers and learn gradually. The important thing is that your daughter is financially secure for life." Jessica's first decision as the new owner of the inheritance was to fulfill a dream born during that long struggle, creating a support program for workers facing unfair situations. "Robert, I want you to lead this program," she said during a meeting in one of the apartments that now belonged to Emma. "Jessica, I don't have the education for this," Robert replied humbly. "You have something more important than education. You have character, and life experience no college can teach." Robert accepted the offer with tears in his eyes. He had lost his job as a doorman, but gained the opportunity to help others in similar situations. The Eleanor Williams Worker Support Foundation was launched with an initial budget of 500,000 Rs. It offered free legal advice, psychological support, and even temporary financial aid for workers facing persecution or injustice. Robert's story became an inspiration for many. He began receiving letters from workers across the country, sharing similar struggles. Some fired for reporting misconduct, others for refusing to engage in illegal practices. "Every letter I get reminds me why doing what's right is worth it," Robert would say during his talks. Emma, now 4, didn't fully understand what had happened, but she knew Robert was someone special. She called him Grandpa of my heart and visited the program's office nearly every day with her mother. "Grandpa Robert, why did you help me when I was lost?" she asked one day with childlike curiosity. "Because every child deserves someone to care for them, sweetheart, and because doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always important." The family's accounting firm was also restructured under Jessica's management. She hired an experienced manager, but made sure to learn the business herself to make informed decisions for Emma's future. "I want my daughter to be proud of the choices I made for her," Jessica explained to the company's employees. The transformation in their lives was remarkable. Robert, once an invisible doorman in the social hierarchy, became a champion for workers' rights. Jessica, who had been threatened and humiliated, emerged as a respected businesswoman and social activist. 2 years after the trial, the program had already assisted over 200 cases. Many workers resolved their situations with legal help, while others found new jobs through the program's growing network. "I never imagined something so painful could lead to something so beautiful," remarked Dorothy, who was also hired to coordinate family support services. The story gained even more attention when it was turned into a television documentary. The film showed how a simple act of kindness had changed countless lives and inspired social change. Charles Williams tried to sue Jessica for defamation after the documentary aired, but the case was quickly dismissed. He had lost all credibility and was now facing financial troubles after spending heavily on lawyers during the inheritance battle. "Greed blinds people," remarked Michael Thompson Smith in an interview. Charles had a comfortable life, but lost everything because he couldn't accept that a child had a right to an inheritance that wasn't his to give. Emma grew up surrounded by love and care. Jessica made sure she knew the story of Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa Robert, so she would understand the importance of doing what's right, even when it's hard. "My daughter will grow up knowing that money isn't the most important thing in life," Jessica would say. "What matters most are the people we love and the values we stand for." The apartment where it all began, in Riverview Estates, was transformed into the headquarters of the Worker Support Program. Eleanor Williams' old penthouse became a symbol of hope for people facing workplace injustices. Robert Johnson kept his original guard booth as an office, refusing to move to a more luxurious space. "This is where it all started, and this is where I want to stay," he'd explain whenever someone asked. The rag doll Emma was carrying the day she was found lost became a sort of mascot for the program. It sat on Robert's desk, reminding everyone of the importance of protecting children and standing up for the most vulnerable. 5 years after it all began, Robert was honored by the New York City Council for his service to the community. During his speech, he couldn't hold back his emotions. "I always thought I was just an ordinary doorman. I never imagined I'd be here one day, being honored for something I consider natural, protecting a child. This taught me that we all have the power to change someone's life, no matter our job or social standing." Jessica sat in the audience with Emma, now 8 years old, watching the ceremony with pride. The girl had grown up bright and kind-hearted, always eager to help other children. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to work at Grandpa Robert's program," Emma said after the ceremony. "You can do that, sweetheart. But you can do so much more too. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, anything you want." "But I want to help people the way Grandpa Robert does." Jessica smiled, knowing she had raised a daughter with strong values, just as Eleanor Williams had wished. The program continued growing, expanding to other cities. The methodology Robert and his team developed became a national model for defending workers' rights. Universities began studying it as an example of social transformation through solidarity. What impresses me most about this story is how it shows that real change can start with simple gestures, a sociology professor remarked during a conference about the program. Robert never quite got used to all the attention and recognition. He remained the same humble man, always ready to listen and help those in need. "What matters isn't the recognition I receive, but the lives we manage to touch," he'd say in interviews. The accounting firm also thrived under Jessica's leadership. She implemented a social responsibility policy that included scholarships for employees' children and a first job program for underprivileged youth. "I want Eleanor Williams' company to be remembered not just for its financial success, but for its positive social impact," Jessica explained during board meetings. Emma became known at school for her generosity. She often organized toy and clothing drives for less fortunate children, always explaining that she had learned from Grandpa Robert that helping others was the most important thing in life. During one of these drives, Emma met Olivia, an 8-year-old girl living in a shelter after her mother could no longer care for her due to mental health struggles. The two became inseparable friends. "Mommy, Olivia doesn't have anywhere to go when she leaves the shelter. Can she come live with us?" Emma asked one day. Jessica spoke with the shelter's staff and learned that Olivia truly needed a foster family. After much thought and conversation with Robert, who had become her advisor in all important decisions, Jessica decided to adopt Olivia. Mrs. Eleanor always spoke about the importance of family, Jessica said during the adoption process. I want to give Olivia the same love and opportunities that my Emma has. Olivia's arrival brought even more joy to the family. Robert gained another granddaughter of the heart, and the two girls became partners in all their mischief and adventures. The worker support program also expanded to include a specialized department for adoption and child custody matters. Inspired by Jessica's experience with Olivia, many families were formed through this initiative. It's amazing how one good deed leads to others, remarked Dorothy, who had become a sort of grandmother to the girls. 10 years after the day Robert found Emma lost in the parking lot, he decided to write a book telling the whole story. The chosen title was The Legacy of the Heart: How a Glass of Water Changed Our Lives. I'm not much of a writer, Robert confessed to Jessica, but I want it known that miracles exist and happen when we choose to do what's right. Jessica helped him organize his thoughts and find a professional writer to assist. The book became a bestseller, and all proceeds went to the worker support program. At the book launch, Emma, now 13, gave a moving speech. Grandpa Robert always says he just gave water to a lost child, but I know he did much more than that. He gave me a family, he gave me security, and he taught me that love is stronger than fear. Charles Williams, who had lost everything in the legal battle, appeared at the book launch. Many grew tense, fearing confrontation, but he approached Robert humbly. I came to apologize, Charles said, his voice breaking. I wasted years chasing money and forgot what truly matters. What you did for my niece was what I should have done. Robert embraced him, showing the forgiveness that had always been in his heart. It's never too late to start over, Charles. If you'd like to help with the program, you're welcome. Charles became a program volunteer, specializing in cases of families in conflict over inheritance. His personal experience made him uniquely qualified to guide others making the same mistakes he had. I lost my family because of greed, he said in talks. Don't let that happen to you. No amount of money is worth more than a family's love. His transformation became another inspiring chapter in the story. He gradually regained his family's trust and even developed a cordial relationship with Jessica and the girls. Emma and Olivia grew up knowing their story from the beginning. They took pride in being part of a family formed through kindness and the courage to do what's right. We're proof that happy endings exist, Olivia wrote in her school essays. The program Robert founded continued to grow, becoming a nationally recognized non-profit. They had assisted over 5,000 cases and had offices in 15 states. Jessica became a sought-after speaker, sharing her family's story at business events and universities. Her message was always the same. Success isn't measured just in money, but in the positive impact we have on people's lives. Robert, though officially retired, still went to the program's office every day. He became a spiritual father to hundreds of people who had been helped over the years. He's our daily inspiration, said Sarah, a lawyer who had worked with the program for 5 years. Whenever we face a tough case, we ask ourselves, what would Robert do? During an interview for a documentary about the program's 10-year anniversary, Robert reflected on the entire journey. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I hadn't stopped to give water to that lost little girl. I'd probably still be an anonymous doorman, which wouldn't be bad. But fate wanted me to be part of something bigger. Emma, now 18 and about to start college to study law, was present at the interview. Grandpa Robert has always been modest, but he changed the lives of thousands of people, not just mine, but all the families the program has helped over the years. The young woman had decided to study law to continue the work of defending labor rights. She had ambitious plans to expand the program to other Latin American countries. I want Grandpa Robert's story to inspire people everywhere, she said. I want to show that no matter where you're born or what you do, you can make a difference in someone's life. Olivia, now 16, chose a different but equally important path. She wanted to study psychology to work with vulnerable children. I know what it's like to need someone to care for you, Olivia explained. I want to be for other kids what the Williams-Thompson family was for me. The two sisters, united by love rather than blood, became symbols of how love can overcome any hardship. They actively participated in the program's activities and were beloved by all the staff. End of story. Dear listeners, what an incredible journey we've followed together. The story of Robert, Jessica, and Emma shows us how a simple act of kindness can transform entire lives. Now we want to know, what did you think of this touching story? Do you believe Robert made the right choice by protecting Emma? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. If you have a similar story to share, leave it in the comments with heartfelt words. Your stories may inspire others. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.